Okay, now let's go on and take a look at charts for time series. We'll use File Open and open the time series file. Let's create a simple time series chart. We have just a few data points here, so it's appropriate to use a column chart. Select our data set from A1 to B10. This will be the easiest chart we create in this topic. Just hit Alt F1 and you're done. You have a simple column chart showing a time series. Now it seems a little bit redundant to have the legend on the right-hand side, especially since we have the word sales as the title and the word sales in the legend. If you go to the layout ribbon, choose Legend, None. There we go. That's a perfectly acceptable time series chart. Let's go on to the next worksheet. Now in this case, we have over 50 years worth of data. If we tried to create a column chart from this data set, it would not look very good at all. Let's choose the data. I'm going to hold down the Shift key, hit the down arrow, the End key, the down arrow, and the right key. From the Insert ribbon, open the Line drop-down and choose 2D Line, and then Line. That's a great looking chart. Even though we have over 50 years of data, the line shows up as a nice smooth line and people can understand the trend. Again, and this will be a recurring theme, if you only have one series of data, you almost always want to go to the layout ribbon and remove your legend. Now the other type of chart that works well for a large series with many points is a variant of the line chart called an area chart. Let's go to the Design ribbon and choose Change Chart Type. In the left-hand category, select Area, and then choose the first area chart. Click OK. Basically, in an area chart, the area underneath your line is colored with a solid fill color. In our example so far, we've had a data point for every year. Sometimes, though, you might be missing data points. Let's go on to the next worksheet. In this case, my researcher was able to find some data for the years 1951, 61, 71, and then once we got to the 90s, I have data points for every other year, and then in the 2000s, data points for every year. Unfortunately, though, Excel is plotting this data incorrectly. The distance from 1951 to 1961 along the axis is the exact same as the distance from 2001 to 2002. There's a setting that will allow us to tell Excel to create the axis as a time-based axis. Here's what we do. Right-click the numbers along the bottom of the chart. Choose Format Axis. In the first category, the axis options, about a third of the way down, there's a setting for axis type. We want to change this from automatic to specifically say that it's a date-based axis. Click Close. Now Excel understands that those are years, and it adds the appropriate space from 1951 to 1961. You'd be able to see this better if I added markers to the line. So let's go to the Design ribbon, change Chart Type, and choose a line chart with markers. Now you can see that Excel is plotting the data once every 10 years early on and once every couple of years later in the chart. Now if your data was specifically by date, in other words year, month, and day, Excel would correctly get this setting right. However, in this case, where we have data by year, you have to explicitly go in and choose Format and change the setting yourself. Let's go on to the next worksheet, the Change Line worksheet. We'll scroll up to the top to take a look at a bad chart. Now here we have data where we had actuals for the first 6 quarters, but you'll notice subtly in cell A8 and cell A9, it's Q3F and Q4F. That means that it's a forecasted number. Now unfortunately, the person creating the chart didn't have the skills necessary in order to differentiate that line. I'll hit page down and show you my suggested improvement. In this case, the actuals appear as a solid blue line and the forecast appears as a dashed red line. Let's build this chart together. Hit page down, and you'll see that we have our original data set. Now remember the last 2 numbers, for Q3 and Q4, are forecasted numbers. They're not real numbers. We need to cut the 67 and 147 from column B and move it over to column C. I'll select those cells, Control X to cut, go right, and Control V to paste. In order to make this work properly, the 7 in row 66 also needs to be copied instead of cut to cell C66. Actually, in this case, I'm just going to type it in. Okay, now we'll select this data set from cell A60 down through C68. Go to the Insert ribbon, open the Line drop-down. Now in the top row, we have 3 different thumbnails of line charts. This is an interesting spot to understand the difference between these thumbnails. In the first thumbnail, the lines actually cross. In the second thumbnail, the lines never cross, but the second line is in the middle of the chart. That is called a stacked line chart. You'll see stacked line, stacked column, and stacked bar charts, where the markers are appearing on top of each other, they never cross, but the top marker is not all the way at the top of the chart. The third icon is 100% stacked. This is where Excel ignores the actual numbers and instead plots percentages so that way they add up to 100%. In this particular case, we need the first thumbnail. There we go. Now we've created a chart where the blue is actual and the red is forecast, and for the first time, our legend on the right-hand side does a great job of explaining that. In case this chart ever gets printed in black and white, though, I'd like to do something to emphasize that the forecast is not an actual number. Go to our Format ribbon, and from the Current Selection dropdown, choose Series Forecast. Now we can use the Shape Outline dropdown, choose Dashes, and the fourth dash setting. We'll click away to take a look, and you'll see that we've now replaced that portion of the line with a red dashed line. Now the chart reader is going to think that this is a single line, but in reality, because you set up the data, you understand that we secretly used two data series, one for actual and one for forecast. Okay, let's go on to the next worksheet. In this example, there's one period of the time series that is of interest. You'll notice that I called attention to that single point by changing the color. Hit page down, and we'll try it together. We'll select our data set from A31 through B38. Alt F1 to create the chart. Now I'm going to ask you to click on one of the blue columns, and you'll notice that we have a handle at the top and bottom of all 7 columns in the chart. Now do a single click on just the Friday column. Now we've selected a single data point. If I go to the Format tab, in the Current Selection dropdown on the left-hand side, it says Series Sales Point Friday. Now that dropdown usually has most of the choices available to you, but I have to tell you it does not have each individual point in your chart. If you need to select a single point, you're going to have to select it by being able to click on it. First click selected the entire series. The second click selected just this one data point. Now that the data point is selected, it's very easy. We go to Shape Fill and choose a different color. There you go. Let's go on to the next worksheet, the Trendline worksheet. Now this example is very near and dear to my heart. As you know, I write books about Microsoft Excel, and the publisher gives me a deadline of how many pages I need to write every 30 days. On my first deadline, I started writing on day 25, which was a very painful thing. And now I realize that I have to write throughout the month. For every deadline, I'll set up a chart very similar to this one. There's a goal line at the top that indicates that I need to write 125 pages. I know there's a few days where I won't be writing, so the light blue line is the track line. That's how many pages I plan on writing every day. Column D shows the actual results. Well, in this case, I feel kind of bad because I'm not up to speed with the track line, but Excel has a great tool that will really hammer home for me that I'm not close at all. This is called a trend line. Let's select the green series. Go to the Layout ribbon, open the Trend Line dropdown, and choose Linear Trend Line. Excel has taken a look at the existing data points, done a data regression, and used the least squares method to fit a line to the existing actual points. Now, the reason that this works well immediately after choosing it is that I have many future days on the chart with no data. If you need to project in the future and you don't have empty cells for those future dates, you would have to go into more trendline options and ask Excel to format into the future. Now, typically for me, anything that's a forecast I don't want to have as a solid line on the chart, so I'd like to format the trend line. I'll click on the trend line. You'll see in the current selection box, it'll say Series Actual Trend Line, and now I can go to the Format tab, use the Shape Outline, dashes, and a dot. I also usually recolor that line in red. Wow, those dots are really small. I can barely even see them. Let me go choose a different shape outline. Dashes, and this time I'll choose the fourth option. There, that's much more pronounced. Now I can see that that red line is different than all the other lines. Now, even though I'm only a few pages behind today, this line projects out that by the end of the month, if I continue at the current pace, I'll miss by almost 25 pages. Usually seeing this chart is enough to get me into gear and start writing more pages to make that deadline. Okay, let's go on to the next worksheet, the arrows worksheet. Now, this is a really fun effect if you have sales that are going up and you want to emphasize that point by using arrows. Hit page down and we'll do this together. The first thing we have to do is add an arrow to the worksheet. That's done on the Insert tab of the ribbon. Open the Shapes dropdown, and you can choose any shape, but in this case, let's choose the upward pointing block arrow. Now you want to click and drag in the worksheet, not in the chart, to create an arrow about the right size. That looks good. I'll use Control-C to copy. And now I'll select the chart and select my data series. Control-V to paste, and we replace the columns with arrows. It's a great effect.